Hello, my name is Wendy Hurlbert, and I'm the President and CEO of Life Sciences BC. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the 7th Annual Access to Innovation Conference. We are so thrilled to be here. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge that I'm joining you today from within the ancestral, traditional, and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, including the territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. I'd also like to acknowledge that our speakers throughout the conference are joining us from other unceded Indigenous territories across this beautiful province and country. We are thrilled to have you join us today. This conference is an opportunity for life sciences leaders from research and academia, the health system, and local and global life sciences industry and companies to come together to learn and dialogue on topics of relevance to the sector. From BC's world-class scientific discovery and research, translating scientific innovation into companies and the health system, learnings and opportunities coming out of the COVID-19 pandemic, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and opportunities to create and scale companies and policies to advance the sector. We have lots to talk about, and we have lots to celebrate. As BC's fastest growing sectors, we passionately believe that the life sciences sector is best positioned to drive both the economic recovery and competitiveness of British Columbia while developing innovative products, solutions, and services that will address the complex issues that we have been dealing with in our healthcare system and will ensure that we have a secure and sustainable health system moving forward. Working together, there is nothing that we can't accomplish. While our Premier, John Horgan, sends his regrets he was not able to join us to speak at the event, Minister Callan will be joining us tomorrow. He took some time to write us a message that he wanted me to share with the conference attendees today. So here it is. As Premier of the Province of British Columbia, I'm pleased to welcome everyone attending Life Sciences British Columbia's Access to Innovation 2022 conference. Now in its 7th year, this annual conference continues to offer a valuable platform for important conversation on topics ranging from scientific discovery to economic impact. Building on excellence, a vibrant future for BC Life Sciences will undoubtedly be an exciting theme to explore with leaders from across the sector. Our province is fortunate to be home to a dynamic and innovative life sciences community of physicians, engineers, technologists, clinicians, researchers, and entrepreneurs who have been at the forefront of our response to the COVID-19 pandemic. British Columbia is proud of our strong, growing economy that creates opportunities for people to thrive while supporting the health and well-being of our communities. We know that we couldn't do it without the hard work and dedication of many dedicated individuals across the life sciences sector, and I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of you, as well as Life Sciences British Columbia and the sponsors who have made this event possible. Please accept my best wishes for an invigorating and inspiring conference. Signed, the Honourable John Horgan, Premier of British Columbia. So we look forward to hosting him at an event, but really appreciate him taking the time to write this welcome. I also would like to thank our sponsors, whom without this event, with their support, this event would not be possible. Our keynote sponsors, Abcelera, Deloitte, and Gowling WLG. Our session sponsors, AstraZeneca, Arena Pharmaceuticals, Compugen, Genome BC, iCore, Michael Smith Health Research BC, Novature Ventures, Owen Wiggs, St. Paul's Foundation and Providence Health, and Stem Cell Technologies. Our networking sponsor, Innovative Medicines Canada, event supporter, Canada's Digital Supercluster, and exhibitors, Jersey's Corner and Pharma Inventor. All of these sponsors have booths, so please be sure to reach out to them and connect with them. I also want to thank our sponsors because behind the scenes, it takes a village to put on an event like this. Many people from those organizations that I mentioned have been very involved in the planning of the sessions, recruiting speakers, participating in panels, and we're so blessed in our sectors to have so many leaders who are willing to engage and give their time to our conference. So thank you to everyone. In addition, I'd like to thank the LSBC team. Lots of work has gone on behind the scenes. We are a small and mighty little association, and I'm really appreciative for the amazing staff that we have within our team. So we're very excited, as I said, about this year's conference speakers. You're going to hear from leading researchers and scientists, innovative entrepreneurs, investors, thought leaders, IP specialists, and more. So very much looking forward to the next couple of days. A couple of housekeeping items for everyone. You're encouraged to update your profile with your picture and bio if you haven't already done so. This can be done by clicking on the right-hand corner of your screen where your name is. Also, sound notifications can be turned off and on while through these settings, so encourage you to turn them off. If you have any questions or need any assistance, please drop by the info desk in the virtual lobby, where you will find Life Sciences BC staff also in our booth, or you can email events@lifesciencesbc.ca for further assistance. Please check out the agenda, which is also listed in the main area. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us. You've got lots of opportunities to connect with fellow attendees, exhibitors, and speakers. We encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity and connect with as many people as possible through engaging in the Q&A during sessions, participating in the networking sessions, or visit the expo area to meet the exhibitors. With every interaction you have, you will earn points, and there are prizes of $25 Starbucks gift cards awarded to the most 10 active attendees after the event. So check out the leaderboard to see where you are standing in that activity. We also encourage you to post on social media using our handle lifesciences_BC and the hashtag LSBC Access throughout the conference. So we hope you enjoy the conference. Please note all sessions are recorded and available to the registrants of the conference for 30 days following the event. Please don't hesitate to reach out to LSBC for the LSBC team for any assistance in trying to access those sessions. And with that, I'd like to get us moving and introduce our first speaker, who is David Lisk, Vice President of National Research Council of Canada Industrial Research Assistance Program, commonly known as NRC IRAP, as our opening speaker. It's very appropriate to start with NRC, as NRC has played such a critical role in the life sciences sector and the innovation of so many companies in their early stages. David is a seasoned information and communication technology professional with 35 years of industry experience. Prior to IRAP, David was CEO of DFT Microsystems, a venture-backed semiconductor test equipment firm in Montreal. He served as VP of Operations at Tundra Semiconductor with responsibility for manufacturing, QA, systems, product engineering, production testing, and customer service. He continued in his role in 1993. The company spun out from parent Newbridge Networks, now Alcatel Canada. David holds an MBA from the University of Ottawa and a Bachelor of Applied Science in Electrical Engineering from the University of Waterloo. Over to you, David. The virtual floor is yours.
Thank you, Wendy, and good morning. It is my pleasure to be here with you today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging that the National Research Council of Canada has offices across the country, which are located on unceded, shared, current, and traditional territories of Indigenous peoples. I am joining you today from Ottawa, which is on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquian Anishinaabe people. Could we move to the next slide, please? So today I'd like to begin the presentation with a brief overview of the National Research Council of Canada Industrial Research Assistance Program, better known as IRAP, and to share with you all of the different work we do. Now, this year marks the program's 75th anniversary, and I'd like to share with you some of the things that we've done in the past to support the entrepreneurs, even before entrepreneurs were called entrepreneurs, over the decades. I'm going to speak briefly about the ecosystem for life and health and life sciences in Canada, and then more specifically about how IRAP has been working with small and medium-sized enterprises in the sector to help them out. And then finally, I'll finish with a few thoughts on how IRAP is going to continue to evolve and move forward. Next slide, please. NRC IRAP is part of Canada's innovation ecosystem, helping to drive innovative SME growth and stimulate wealth creation in Canada. Our mandate and our exclusive focus is to accelerate the growth of innovative Canadian SMEs by providing them with comprehensive suite of innovation services, and funding. Every year, IRAP works with about 8,000 SME clients across the country. We provide advice, connections, linkages, funding supports, youth employment projects, and we link innovative Canadian SMEs into global value chains. This work is supported through a nationwide footprint of over 270 industrial technology advisors, or commonly known as ITAs. And yes, that's a very old sounding name, but when you're 75 years old, some of the great stuff sticks. Now, ITAs provide everything from technical advice to business advice. They provide funding assistance, referrals, and they work closely with firms to help them evolve to support their growth ambitions. And in many cases, they become trusted advisors, assisting their clients to solve all kinds of challenges that they have. Next slide. Now, we can see the big 75. As I mentioned at the outset, this is our 75th anniversary of the program. This milestone is an opportunity for us to reflect on the program's evolution through time and how we have been privileged to play a role in supporting so many hardworking Canadian entrepreneurs, helping them to create jobs and to support their growth ambitions. Next slide, please. As you can see, 1947 is a ways back in time, and we are very proud of how we've helped Canadian firms over those years. The program dates back to just post war and was originally called the Technical Information Services, or TIS for short. After the war, TIS was charged with providing advice and scientific knowledge into small Canadian manufacturing companies to help them grow via these services. In the 1960s, as you can see there, the government added additional capability into TIS, and this was the ability to fund firms to help them support growth and to hire new research and development staff into their companies. And that is when the Industrial Research Assistance name was born and has followed us ever since. Over time, IRAP has considered to evolve its services, increasing them up to today, where we provide cybersecurity advice and all kinds of different services that were not even thought of back when we were formed. In the 2000s, as had made and was continuing to make significant investments in building out world-class research environment in Canada, we continue to support innovative firms. Now, since the mid 2000s, the program has expanded in size and scope in order to support Canadian firms seeking access to new markets and global value chains. IRAP is now supporting co-innovation projects and research and development partnership opportunities for Canadian firms in over 45 countries around the world. In 2018, the Government of Canada named NRC IRAP as one of the Government of Canada's flagship innovation support programs. With that new moniker came an increased budget of about $150 million per year and the ability to support rapidly growing companies as they scale by increasing the limit of our project investment to up to $10 million. Now, in 2020, the world changed for everyone. IRAP quickly pivoted to support the Government of Canada-wide response to COVID-19. Team members from across our organization stepped up and worked together to help combat the pandemic, support innovation in ways that could have an immediate impact and make difference in lives of Canadians. We worked in collaboration with our other government department colleagues and addressed critical supply gaps in PPE, diagnostics, sanitation, ventilators, and therapeutics and vaccines. In addition, we delivered the Innovation Assistance Program in the early days of the pandemic. We provided wage subsidies that helped over 2,000 companies who were left out of the main wage subsidy programs that the government of Canada and the provinces and territories had put in place. This was able to support over 26,000 jobs across the country. And in many cases, companies were able to not only survive the pandemic, but were able to get their products into the market and start to prosper. Today, we continue to work actively with our clients and our other government department partners in responding to the pandemic and addressing the challenges and opportunities of life post pandemic. In budget 2021, a year ago, the program grew again with an announcement of an additional 100 million per year for funding of firms. Throughout our 75 years, NRC IRAP has consistently evolved to ensure the program continues to support innovation and technical advancement to benefit small and medium sized enterprises across the country. Next slide, please. Canada has a lot in place with research centers from incubators and other ways for moving ideas into market. We have approximately, as you can see on the slide, 40 world-class research hospitals that are scattered across the country, 23 life science networks and centers, and additional incubators and accelerators that number about 40. Not only is this in the traditional life sciences and health sectors, it's also in the emerging areas of artificial intelligence, where there are over 80 AI companies in the country. All of this comes together and it's distributed across the country. BC absolutely has significant presence, and you're going to see that in the next slide, but also Atlantic Canada with Dalhousie University and BioVectra and other companies. Quebec in the Montreal area and Quebec City areas, significant manufacturing capacity and innovative firms. Toronto, Kitchener Waterloo, significant presence of life science manufacturing and also companies that produce diagnostics, etc. On the prairies, you have University of Calgary, University of Alberta, University of Saskatchewan, plus many, many companies that are spun off from those centers. And then finally, British Columbia with UBC and the various companies. And you saw a collection of them, Stem Cell and Accelera, as part of the sponsorship group, which we would consider some of the larger codes that we have supported in the past and also continue to work with as IRAP and as the Government of Canada. Over also, and I guess finally, the Government of Canada announced a $2.2 billion health and life science strategy investment that was intended to help create the conditions within the country so that if there is another serious pandemic or emergency health situation, that we have the capacity to produce many of the products within the country and reduce our reliance on external organizations. All of this strategy is important to support the future health for everyone who lives in the country. Next slide, please. Now, this is sort of a snapshot of the landscape across the country. You'll notice that we've identified about 900 firms in the ecosystem, generating about 66 billion in revenues. Just give everyone higher revenues. These companies are the backbone of the life science sector and are distributed across the country, and they're the ones that are working every day to advance their technologies. Now, as I mentioned, we're strong in emerging technology areas like AI, diagnostics, and regenerative medicine. Next slide. And so this slide is sort of my favorite slide because it's about IRAP and the companies that we help. You can see on the slide, the first thing is beyond the 900 I mentioned before, there's almost 1,000 other companies that are emerging from either from entrepreneurs starting companies or spinning out of universities or other scenarios. Over the past 5 years, IRAP has invested about 260 million to support about $600 million worth of research and development for this sector. And that's totaled up to around just over 3,000, 3,400 projects. In a given year, IRAP supports about 3,000 to 3,400 projects. So over the last 5 years, about 20% of our projects have been in the health and life sciences areas. You can see, if you're an investor or if you're interested in the sort of the demographics of our companies, they are scattered across the country. There is concentration here in British Columbia, out in the prairies, and also in Ontario, and they're young companies and they're small in size. So you can see in the top right that a significant number of companies are under 9 people, but you can also see in the bottom right that they are growing rapidly at greater than 20% per year, and many of them much faster than that. And so with that, I think we can move on to the next slide. I wanted to take a moment to talk a little bit about um, some of the support programs that we have put in place around the country. I'm going to talk a little bit about one, which is with the Canadian Space Agency. Before I go there, um, the 270 ITAs that I mentioned early on are mid and late career professionals. They've worked in the private sector, and we recruit them in to have sectorial experience. And so not only are they located across the country, we have 110 delivery locations. Now, during the pandemic, they're not exactly up and running, but when we're post pandemic, they will come back. And not only do we have that, we also have groups of ITAs that are grouped in sector teams. We have 9 sector teams, everything from advanced manufacturing, agri-food, life science, health, and others, clean tech, etc. The health, life science sector team engaged with the Canadian Space Agency back in about 2016. There was an ITA talking with the Canadian Space Agency scientists and program folks, and came up with this idea of using the biomedical sector team connectivity to SMEs and the challenges of harsh and remote environments. Space, of course, is kind of the considered the ultimate harsh environment. However, our north is also, with the addition of oxygen, still harsh and remote. And so the technologies that are useful in the space context are also useful in a northern context or in a remote context. And so they work together to do some piloting. And I'm pleased to say that we set up in 2021, last September, the program. It's called the NRC IRAP Canadian Space Agency Remote Health Program. I know it just rolls off the tongue. And it is developed and launched to help fund SMEs to create solutions and products that would be applicable in the north, applicable for remote environments, and applicable in space. So, a dual use type of technology environment. And I'm pleased to say that the very first of these um, projects are being funded this fiscal year. Next slide. So, when we look to the future, what is it going to bring? When you're 75 years old, the one thing you can say is this year was not the same as last year, and over again. We started out the program and the work that we're doing is helping companies transition from a wartime footing into a domestic or commercial footing, leveraging knowledge and new technologies to be brought into SMEs across the country. Over the years, what we've discovered is that we have to evolve to continue to be relevant. So when we look out to the future, what does that mean over the next 10 years? Well, Canadian SMEs need to aspire to go international, to co-develop and deliver their products around the world. We are also going to stay attuned to the innovation footprint. Originally, IRAP TIS was formed to transition existing knowledge into a wide variety of companies. We then have advanced to fund deep and interesting research and development projects that could be commercialized. Now we do that, plus we support new business monetization models. We support SaaS type products delivery. Everything that is moving and the future, well, the today's version of the future is quantum and blockchain and those types of investments. We will continue to work with SMEs and entrepreneurs to ensure that their ambitions to bring never before seen products into the market will be where we are funding significant contribution, as well as ensuring that we remain with our roots and that we help bring new knowledge into companies that that may be in older or less darling industries, but still very valuable and creating wealth in Canada. So IRAP is going to continue to evolve through time as the needs of our SME community change. Next slide. So thank you very much. It was my pleasure to be here to be able to support um, with this presentation the meetings that you're going to be having for the rest of the day. So thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Super interesting, and what an extraordinary impact NRC IRAP has had over 75 years. And as you and I have talked, I can't think of any conversations I've had with Smees out in British Columbia that haven't mentioned how critical the funding was at, in particular, the early stages. So, very interesting. You've given us a little bit of a forward-facing look at where NRC is going as well. But I want to pause and say, what do you see as the key challenges facing Canadian SMEs as we emerge out of the pandemic? You touched on the fact that some of the programs that came forward to the pandemic, in particular for life sciences companies, really didn't apply. And it was great to see how NRC was able to step in and help. Um, so as we look ahead, where do you see some of the challenges?
So many things came out of the pandemic. New products, never to see before seen, vaccines being, technologies being approved, etc. And when you look at the greater economy, what we're observing and we believe that will continue as we move out of the pandemic and hopefully not into an endemic situation, but we're free of COVID. First is supply chains.
Mhm.
Being able to control your supply chain, all your inputs, is essential. And so, considering onshoring some of your production, those types of things could be very important. The cost of a supply chain, doing the math to understand where you can become constricted in your ability to deliver the product at the cost that you're selling it for. And we've seen costs go up everywhere from buying,
Mhm.
green onions at the grocery store to buying new cars and new houses. And all of those things are going to remain for certainly a significant amount of time. Now, the key challenge for many of our companies that are in their product is really in the brains of the human beings who need to deliver the product, develop it, and to release it into the market. Hiring and retention and upskilling are going to be our key challenges that they're facing. Um, One of the um, areas that we've heard from in other parts of the country is how come I'm not able to retain? How come I'm not able to retract? And it really comes down to the culture that you're offering to your new potential clients. And so you need to take the time and be aware that your product offering is interesting to your clients who are buying, but also your environment and your company has to be interesting to your staff. Now, specifically for life science companies, so not only do they have all that problem, the
I was
next
gonna say,
the
for
next
when you're
thing
talking
is
about the brain power, you like you've just described the life sciences companies, right? Especially the
yes,
early stage ones.
Exactly. And so finally, I would add, for life science companies, as you're forming, or even at this stage, ensure you've worked out your entire delivery chain. It is not helpful to use a university lab to create your first clinical trial when you know there's not going to be the scale up volume to go to even to your third clinical trial. Make sure you're working and with a manufacturer who can produce the volumes that you need in time. So, because the cost of retransitioning through, for instance, from a university lab, perfectly acceptable quality, etc., to going into enough volume and going into mass production, you don't want to recycle and sit and have to submit to Health Canada or to other agencies around the world your products. So those are some of the uh, issues that we're seeing in with companies who have many stages to their clinical trials and then have to get authorization to go to mass production. Build
Mhm.
in your mass production. Now, I'm a semiconductor guy, and if I was talking to someone who was going to do the same kind of challenge in semiconductors, it's exactly the same thing. Ensure you've got your sources of supply all organized before you start, or else it will slow down your progress. And with that, Wendy, I'll hand it back to you.
I think that's a super important point. So, you've touched on a couple of really significant areas. One, of course, the intellectual horsepower of a company, for lack of a better word, which ultimately results in IP. I think we're at a very interesting and exciting um, on transformative time. And so the advice that you just gave is really critically important and something that I talk about frequently. If I look at something like the Fitbit, for example, at some point in the product development, Fitbit needed to decide if they were going to become a consumer electronic product or a medical device. And that path to market, the supply chain, the production, the scaling, are two very different paths depending on if you're following the medical device side or the consumer electronic side. And you touched on the importance of that forward thinking of a supply chain. And this is where we're at such a pivotal time in Canada. It's fantastic that the federal government announced the life sciences and biomanufacturing strategy of 2.2 billion. But I think we all know, and we knew it before the pandemic just made it headlines. We really don't have that biomanufacturing and production capability in Canada. So and we have intention to build it, so that's great. But when you're a SME, and if you take your advice earnestly and say build out the supply chain and think about it and try and have sovereignty, do they have the ability to do that right now?
There are, depending on the technology that their platform rests on, there are
Hmm.
contract manufacturers that they can work with. We've invested in several vaccine companies,
Hmm.
many of which are leveraging the supply chain that exists in Canada and working with a volume manufacturer right out of the chute on they're on their second clinical trial on that clinical trial. And
Right,
so they will be set up when they get their approvals to go into mass production, whether it's for Canadian consumption or for consumption in other parts of the country or world, I
right.
mean. And it's not all doom and gloom. I
Oh, I
mean,
don't think it is, but
all of these opportunities are here. It's a moment in time where the the vibrancy and the knowledge and the capability and the funding for life science health companies in this country is put all that underlying investment and entrepreneurial capability, they can be married up. And out of this pandemic, there will be many, many large companies grown from all of the investments and work that IREP has done, but also the support in universities and academia, et cetera. Because it's a village story. It's not an IREP story. You can't
mhm.
build this kind of competence and support in this country without all of the government, academia, industry, venture money, et cetera, all coming together.
I couldn't agree more. I think, and we are at a pivotal time and we're at an exciting time. I was pleased to hear you also acknowledge the talent question because I think that's on the top of minds of many of our organizations about attracting talent and keeping talent. But it's also about developing talent. So we often talk about talent as it's both a quantity and a
Yes.
skills problem because we're trying to build up a sector, a sector. We have a very strong life sciences sector, but the biomanufacturing piece of it really hadn't been very prominent in Canada up till now for lots of reasons. And so that comment about ensuring that as the capital is flowing in, as these investments are being made in the infrastructure, we need to make sure that we are developing, both attracting the skills, but also developing the skills so that these jobs do stay here.
Yes, absolutely. Well said.
Yeah. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and speak to us. And happy birthday to NRC.
Thank you so much. We are very proud and smug that we are 75 years old. I know we don't look a day over 60, but thank you so much for having me, and it was my pleasure to kick off the event.
Thank you.
Bye now.
So thanks again to David. Our next session is going to be led by IRCOR, where we'll be discussing the making of Epitopia, a new transatlantic cancer immunotherapeutics venture. It very nicely dovetails off of the world of what's possible that David was talking about. So we will see you in about 10 minutes.